There was a moment, many years ago, when I sat across from a patient who had not slept for 7 nights. He had not come to me because of insomnia. He had come because something inside him, something he could not name, had begun to speak. He told me with trembling hands that a small voice had whispered to him in the early hours of morning, and that this voice had said only one thing: "You have arrived." Asterisk. He did not know where he had arrived. He did not know who had spoken. But he knew in the marrow of his bones that he could no longer return to the man he had been the day before. I remember leaning back in my chair and watching him for a long time without speaking, because I had seen this look before. I had seen it in soldiers who returned from war and could no longer recognize their own homes. I had seen it in mothers who had lost children, and in young men who had built entire lives on foundations that had quietly collapsed beneath them. It was the look of a soul that had been found, not by another person, not by a doctor, not even by God, in the way the priests spoke of him, but by something older, something that had been waiting. And I tell you this story now, at the threshold of what we are about to discuss, because I have come to believe, after a lifetime of watching the human soul reveal itself in dreams, in symptoms, in synchronicities, in tears that arrived without warning, that nothing in this life truly reaches us by accident. The book that fell from the shelf at the moment you were ready to read it. The stranger who said the exact sentence you had been asking the universe in silence. The illness that arrived only when you had finally stopped listening to yourself. These are not coincidences. These are the messengers of a deeper order. And this very moment, this video, this voice you are hearing now, perhaps it too is one of them. Because I noticed something curious during the long decades of my work. I observed that certain people did not find certain truths until the precise hour they were ready to bear them. A man could walk past the same book in a library for 30 years and never see it. And then, on a morning when his soul had been cracked open by grief or wonder or quiet despair, he would walk into that same library and the book would seem to glow on the shelf. He would feel almost physically that it had been waiting for him. He would open it and find on the very first page the sentence he had been searching for since childhood, and he would weep, not because of the words, but because of the timing. Because something in him had recognized that he was no longer alone in his knowing. This is what I came to call, with great care and even greater hesitation, the principle of meaningful coincidence. The Greeks would have called it the work of Hermes, the messenger who slips between worlds. The Taoists would have called it the way revealing itself. The mystics of every tradition have known, in their own languages, that there is a thread running beneath the visible world, and that this thread sometimes lifts a single moment of your life and places it directly into your hands, saying, asterisk here, this is yours, this is now, do not look away. Asterisk, and I have wondered many times whether the people who arrive in my consulting room have truly come of their own will. Of course, in the outer sense they have made appointments, they have walked through doors, they have paid their fees. But beneath this I have always sensed another arrival, a deeper one. The soul knocks before the body knocks. And by the time a man sits before me with his suffering, something within him has already been preparing for this hour, perhaps for years. He simply did not know it. He thought he was lost. He was in truth on his way. But the most surprising part is yet to come, because what I observed went beyond the arrival of patients in my office. I began to notice the same pattern in everything. In the dream, a woman had 3 nights before her father died. In the song, a young man could not stop hearing in his head until he discovered it had been the song his estranged brother had been playing on the day of his accident, hundreds of kilometers away. In the recurring image of a deer that appeared to one of my analyzers in waking and sleeping life, until she understood with a shudder that ran through her whole being what part of herself she had been hunting and denying for decades. These were not the products of an overactive imagination. These were the language of the psyche, speaking from a layer beneath personal memory, beneath family history, beneath even culture itself. This is what I named the collective unconscious. Not because I wish to invent new terminology to impress academics. I have never had patience for that game, but because I could find no other word that described what I was witnessing. Beneath the small, frightened ego of modern man, there lay an ocean, and that ocean had its own currents, its own seasons, its own way of bringing things to the shore at the precise moment they were needed. And so when I say that this video, these words, this very breath you are taking as you listen, when I say that all of it may have found you for a reason, I am not speaking in metaphor. I am speaking from 40 years of observation. I am speaking from the dreams of thousands of patients. From my own descent into what I once called my confrontation with the unconscious, that long and terrible season of my life, when I could no longer trust my own mind. And yet, in the darkness of that not knowing, I found a depth of knowing I had never before imagined. Let me tell you what I believe happens in the hidden architecture of a human life. There comes a time, and it comes to every soul who is still alive enough to feel it, when the structures we have built begin to ache. The career that once defined us begins to feel like a cage. The relationships we believed were our shelter begin to feel like masks pressed against our face. The identity we wore so proudly into adulthood begins to slip from our shoulders like a coat that no longer fits. And we look around at our lives and we think, asterisk, whose life is this? Who chose all of this? And where in all of it am I? This is not weakness. This is not failure. This is not, as the modern world so foolishly insists, depression that must be medicated away as quickly as possible so that the machine of productivity may continue uninterrupted. Now, this is the soul knocking. This is the deeper self, what I have called in my work, the totality of who you truly are, beginning to demand its place at the table. And when the soul begins to knock, it does not knock politely. It does not knock once and go away. It knocks through symptoms, through dreams, through encounters, through the strange feeling that arises when you watch a film or read a passage or hear a stranger's voice and something inside you breaks open without permission. What Jung wrote about this is deeply unsettling for the modern mind, because we have been taught that we are the masters of our own lives, that through willpower and discipline and the proper techniques, we may engineer ourselves into the persons we wish to be. But I observed again and again that the deepest movements of a human life do not arise from the will. They arrive, they come to us, they find us. And the only choice we truly have, the only freedom that remains to us in this matter, is whether we shall receive what has arrived or turn from it and pretend it never came. So I ask you now, in this quiet between us, what brought you here? Not the surface answer, not the algorithm, not the recommendation. Beneath all of that, what was the deeper hunger? What was the quiet pain that had been speaking in you? Perhaps for months, perhaps for years, perhaps since childhood. Because I assure you, with all the seriousness of a man who has spent his life listening to the unspoken languages of the psyche, that hunger is real, that pain is intelligent, and it has led you here for a reason that your conscious mind may not yet understand. Here begins the darkest game of the unconscious, because what calls us toward our own healing rarely arrives in pleasant forms. The patients who came to me in the deepest distress were almost always those who had been ignoring their dreams for years. Their unconscious had whispered to them in symbols, in nightmares, in feelings of unease, and they had silenced these whispers with work, with alcohol, with relationships chosen to distract rather than to nourish, with the endless noise that modern life so generously provides. And so the unconscious, having been refused entry through the gentle door, came through the wall. It came as illness. It came as breakdown. It came as the marriage that suddenly could not continue, or the career that suddenly could not be sustained. I remember one woman in particular. She had been by every external measure a great success. A professor at a fine university, 2 children who had grown into accomplished adults, a husband who had remained faithful for 30 years. And yet she came to me because she could no longer stop weeping. She wept in lectures. She wept in grocery stores. She wept while she slept. And she did not know why. She told me with a kind of bewildered shame that her life was perfect, that she had no right to feel as she did. Asterisk. That is precisely the problem, I told her. Asterisk, you have built a life that has no room for you in it. For weeks, I asked her only one question. Asterisk. What did you dream of before you became who you are now? And she could not answer. She had forgotten. The girl she had been, the one who had wanted to paint, who had loved horses, who had once written poems on the backs of envelopes, had been buried so completely beneath the woman she had become that she could no longer find her. And the weeping, you see, was not weakness. The weeping was that buried girl calling up from beneath the snow. The weeping was the soul announcing that the time of forgetting was over. The weeping was, in its way, a kind of grace. The detail most people overlook hides precisely here. We do not break down, we break open. The crisis that you fear may be the very thing that has come to deliver you. The grief that has been chasing you for years may be the angel in disguise. The unease that wakes you at 3 a.m, that follows you through your day, that whispers to you in moments of stillness, this is not your enemy. This is the part of you that has not yet been allowed to live. And it has chosen this hour, this season of your life, this particular crossroads, to speak. I have known men who tried to outrun this hour for decades. They drank, they walked, they built second careers and third marriages. They moved across continents. They reinvented themselves a dozen times. But the unconscious is patient. It does not forget. It waits as the wolf waits at the edge of the forest, knowing that eventually the deer will tire. And when the deer tires, the encounter happens. And in that encounter, though the deer, in its panic, believes it is being destroyed, something else is also happening. Something is being completed. A circle is closing that has been open since the beginning. What mythology has been trying to tell us for centuries is precisely this. The hero does not go willingly into the underworld. He is dragged by prophecy, by exile, by the death of someone he loved, by a wound that will not heal. Inanna descended into the depths and was stripped of her 7 veils. Orpheus followed his beloved into the realm of the dead and lost her again, but returned with the gift of song that could move stones. Christ wept in the garden, asking for the cup to pass from him before he walked the road that led to the cross and to whatever lay beyond it. In every tradition, the descent precedes the ascent. The dismemberment precedes the wholeness. And it is rarely chosen. It arrives. This is why I have come, over many years, to speak less of effort and more of receptivity. The modern man wishes to seize his transformation as he seizes his promotions and his vacations, by force of will, by careful planning, by checking items off a list. But the soul does not work in this way. The soul works in the way of the seed in the earth. Slowly, in darkness, through processes we cannot see and cannot hurry. Our task is not to force the growth. Our task is to recognize the season. And when the season arrives, and it has arrived for you, or you would not be listening to these words, our task is to say, asterisk, yes, asterisk. Not loudly, not heroically, just quietly. The way one says yes to a guest who has been waiting at the door for many years, the real turning point begins right here. Because the moment you recognize that something has been finding you, that the strange book, the painful relationship, the unexpected illness, the conversation that pierced you, the video you did not plan to watch, but somehow could not turn away from, the moment you recognize that all of these are not random fragments, but pieces of a pattern addressed to you by name, by your deepest self, then something changes in the very texture of your existence. You are no longer the victim of chance. You are no longer the passive object of fate. You become, instead, a participant in a dialogue between your small, daily, frightened self and that larger self that I have come to believe is the true author of every meaningful life. I will tell you something that I rarely told my patients in those exact words, because I did not wish to make of myself a prophet. But I shall tell it to you now, because perhaps you are ready. The self, that totality which lives in each of us, which the alchemists symbolize as the philosopher's stone, which the mystics call the divine spark, which the Eastern traditions call the Atman. The self is not passive. It is not waiting for you to discover it through clever meditation techniques. It is actively reaching for you every day, every hour. It speaks through your dreams. It speaks through your symptoms. It speaks through the people who appear in your life. It speaks sometimes through the voice of a stranger on a screen in a language that bypasses your defenses and goes straight to the buried place that has been waiting. And so when something finds you, truly finds you, in that way that makes the hair rise on the arms, that makes your eyes feel without warning, that makes you stop and sit down and look at the wall for a long time without thinking, when something finds you in that way, you must not dismiss it. You must not say asterisk, coincidence, asterisk, and return to your routines. You must honor it. You must sit with it. You must ask, as I learned to ask my own dreams across many long nights, asterisk, what wants to be known here? What part of me has sent this messenger? What is being asked of me that I have for too long refused? Now, I am aware that the world in which you live makes this kind of listening exceedingly difficult. I have watched with great sorrow the acceleration of modern life across the decades of my own existence. When I was a young man, a letter took weeks to arrive. There was time in those weeks for the soul to prepare itself. There was silence between the events of life. There was space in which dreams could be remembered, conversations could be considered, feelings could be felt before they were drowned out by the next demand. The modern human being lives in a different ecosystem entirely. There is no silence. There is no space. There is only the constant clamor of voices, images, notifications, demands, opinions, and beneath all of it, the soul goes quieter and quieter until many people no longer hear it at all. This is what I would call the great loneliness of our age, not the loneliness of being without other people. There are more people available to you now through your devices than at any point in human history. No, the loneliness I speak of is the loneliness of being without yourself. The loneliness of not knowing what you actually feel beneath what you are told to feel. The loneliness of not knowing what you actually want beneath what you have been trained to want. The loneliness of going through years, sometimes decades, of a life that looked from the outside like success, and feeling in the silence between heartbeats that no one had truly lived it. This is why I believe the messengers must work harder now than they ever have. The dreams must come more insistently. The symptoms must announce themselves more loudly. The synchronicities must arrange themselves with greater drama, because the noise has become so total that the old quiet ways of speaking can no longer be heard. And so, when something does break through to you, when something does find you across the chaos, you should understand that it has worked very hard to arrive. It has, in a sense, fought for your attention. And it would be a grave disrespect both to it and to yourself to glance at it and turn away. I think now of an image that came to me once in active imagination, that technique I developed for entering into dialogue with the figures of the unconscious. And I saw an old man standing at the edge of a forest. He was holding a lantern, and he was not approaching the village, where there were many houses. He was standing instead at a particular path, a path that wound off into the trees, and he was waiting. I asked him in the strange manner one asks such figures, asterisk, who are you waiting for? Asterisk. And he answered, asterisk, I am waiting for the one who is ready. I have been waiting a long time. I will wait as long as I must. But when the one who is ready comes down this path, my work begins. Asterisk, I have thought about that old man many times. I believe he lives in every one of us. He is the part of us that knows. He is the part of us that has been preparing the gift, the insight, the encounter, the awakening, preparing it for years, perhaps for the whole of our lives, and waiting for the hour when we are ready to receive it. He does not interfere. He does not force. He waits. And when you come down the path, when you finally come down the path because you have nowhere else left to go, he lifts his lantern and he says, asterisk, I have been expecting you. Asterisk, perhaps this video is his lantern. Perhaps these words are his greeting. I do not say this to flatter you or to flatter myself. I say it because I have observed across a long life that such things do happen, that a sentence written by a man dead for decades may save the life of a stranger he could never have imagined, that a song composed in one century may carry someone through a grief in another, that meaning travels in ways we do not yet understand, and that it travels very often with precise aim. The arrow finds its target, the message finds its recipient, and when this happens, the only proper response is reverence. And then, after reverence, action, though the action may be very small, very quiet, very interior. It may be only the decision to sit down tonight and listen, truly listen, to a part of yourself that you have been refusing to hear. The paradox at the heart of all of this, and I have come to believe that the deepest truths of the psyche are always paradoxes, is that the very things we have feared most about ourselves are very often the doorways to our greatest becoming. The grief that has been waiting for us is also the love we have not yet allowed ourselves to feel. The anger that lives beneath our calm is also the strength we have not yet used. The darkness we have spent our lives running from is also where our gold has been buried. The alchemists knew this. They wrote in their strange and beautiful language that the prima materia, the raw stuff from which the gold of transformation is made, is always found in the place we least wish to look. Asterisk in sterculini is invenart, they said. Asterisk, it is found in the dunghill, in what we have rejected, in what we have buried, in what we have called unworthy. And so, if this video has found you, and I sense that for some of you it truly has, in that way that cannot be explained by any algorithm, then perhaps the question to sit with is not asterisk, what does this mean? But rather asterisk, what in me has called this to me? What hunger? What unspoken question? What grief that has been waiting for a witness? What gift that has been waiting for permission to emerge? Because something in you knew before you knew that this hour would matter. Something in you brought you here, and whatever that something is, that is the part of you worth listening to. For the rest of your life, beginning tonight, I shall close as I close so many of my sessions, not with an answer, but with a question. Not a question to be solved, but a question to be carried, the way one carries a small candle through a long corridor, watching what it illuminates and what remains in shadow. The question is this: asterisk, what has been trying to reach you, and what would it require of you to finally let it in? Sit with that question. Do not rush toward an answer. Let it work on you the way water works on stone, slowly, patiently, across the season of nights and mornings that lie before you. And know, as you sit with it, that you are not alone in this listening. There have been others before you in every age who arrived at the same threshold. Some turned back, some with great courage walked through. The ones who walked through did not become saints or heroes or wise old men in lanterns. They became simply and at last themselves, which is, I have come to believe, the only true work of a human life. Everything else is rehearsal. So if these words have found you tonight, truly found you, in that way that is hard to explain to anyone who has not felt it, then receive them. Not as a teaching, not as an answer, but as a hand extended across many years by a man who once sat in his own darkness and learned slowly that the darkness was not the enemy. It was the cradle. And whatever has been waiting for you in your own darkness has been waiting precisely because you and no one else were the one it was waiting for. When you turn off the screen tonight, when the room returns to silence, listen not to the silence itself, but to what speaks within it. That is the voice that has always been yours, and it has, I believe, a great deal more to tell you. If only you will sit, as I have sat, of course, from so many before you, and let it begin.